Good evening, everybody. Happy Wednesday, and welcome to another edition of the Jet Fuel Podcast for Ep.7, the official Winnipeg Jets podcast of G Show Productions. I'm your host, Graham the G Show Forsyth. We're, of course, brought to you by Goaltenders, your goalie's personal video review service. Check out their website at gordytumelsongoalies.ca. Truly doing goaltending coaching differently. As well as we're brought to you by Terrico, serving Manitoba producers for over 80 years in the agricultural industry. Visit their website at terrico.ca today to learn more about their great products and what's made them so established as they are. And of course, we're brought to you by Make Canada Fasteners and Tools. Your Make Canada Fasteners Tools and Fasteners and Tools locations can be found in Brandon and Winnipeg. In store, your one-stop shop for all your industrial needs. Be sure to use JetsPod, the promo code, when you enter their stores in Brandon and Winnipeg until the end of October to get 5% off all tools and 5% off all accessories and hardware when you use, of course, that promo code. So I think it's well worth it. You get some price off some really good tools, and you get to, support both of us, Make Canada Fasteners and Tools and G Show Productions. So be sure to use that code if you ever are there. Check out their website too at makecanadafasteners.shop to get a sense of what type of products that they distribute there in the service that they're in. But yeah, for this week's episode, I'm joined by a very special guest. Maybe not very special, but a special guest to us here because he's such a big name in Jets Twitter, on the app formerly known as Twitter, now called X. It's Scott Billeck joining the show, Winnipeg Sun sports reporter as well as Winnipeg Jets beat writer. We had a chance to discuss the Jets' performance last night against the St. Louis Blues, where the Jets grabbed a 4-2 W against their Central Division opponent, their rival. And we also talk about the Jets' first 6 games to start this season, what's coming up. And yeah, it was a lot of fun talking to Scott Billeck of the Winnipeg Sun here on episode 7 of the Jet Fuel Podcast, brought to you by Make Canada Fasteners and Tools, Terrico, and Goaltenders. Scott Billeck, reporter for the Winnipeg Sun, beat reporter for the Winnipeg Jets, joining the show for this latest episode of Jet Fuel. Scott, great to have you back on the show. We saw the Jets take care of business last night at home against the St. Louis Blues, beating a division rival 4-2 to move to 3-3. Your thoughts first off on how you think things went in that W for the Jets yesterday?
Yeah, good game overall. I thought it was, a solid effort from start to finish. The Jets build up a good, a nice 2-0 lead. They give one back on a power play goal. Nice tip in front. It's just a goal that not a lot of goalies are ever going to stop. So, you look at that. Kyle Connor scores to make it 3-1. It's a big goal. It's a big goal from a big player on the team. Those are the types of things that you want to see if you're a fan of this team, or if you're just a player on this team. I mean, you want to see the big dogs stepping up at the right time, and Kyle Connor's goal was exactly that. Connor Hellebuyck, I thought, had a good game. Second goal against was a bit of a fluke, went off Mason Appleton's stick, or off his skate, right to Robert Thomas. So, it was a good game. I liked all 4 lines. They all played well. Jets dominated possession in that game. A little bit of score effects in the third period, but that's to be expected. I mean, it is once again this season, and I think you could argue for 5 games out of the 6 this year, the Jets played a decent game, and probably deserve better. Maybe 4 games. The Edmonton game over the weekend was a little whatever. The Jets made fewer mistakes in Edmonton in the end, but they got outplayed at times. And then obviously the LA game last week where they just got severely outplayed and they were never in that game. So, but yeah, you could easily look at a Jets team right now that would have a 4-2 record. 3-3 is probably, they'll think it's a slightly unfair record, but the fact is they've won 2 straight, and they got really back to the ways that that's going to probably win them a lot of games this year if they can figure out how to kind of harness that style of play for 60 minutes like they did on Tuesday against St. Louis.
Yeah, and this game definitely, I feel like some dedication going to playing for Rick Bonus. Thoughts out to him and his wife, Judy,
Mm-hmm.
who unfortunately suffered a seizure on Sunday, is in hospital. But the Jets, I think that it was a solid game from every single aspect of it. I think starting in the offensive zone, especially the puck movement was evident in terms of how the Jets were planning to cycle from high to down low, take advantage of the Blues' weaker defense core down low, have the players get sucked into those areas and have two people open in the slot, as we saw in the first goal. In that game from David Gustafson, nice pass from Perfetti from behind the goal line, and then the Jets
Yeah.
shortly after going to work again. Lowry locating Appleton, and he's left all alone in the slot and puts it in. Afterwards, though, after the Jets were up 2-0, I think Hellebuck really put this game, with in the Jets' favor in terms of the two huge saves he made when the Blues were able to break through the Jets' defense, get on a little break behind them, and Hellebuck was able to come through and make two huge saves. The PK was pretty solid throughout the game. The one goal the Blues had, it was them successfully drawing Morgan Barron out of position, finding a person on the right side, and that tip, like you said, tough for any goaltender.
Yeah.
Not only Connor Hellebuck to stop, but I think what's been so huge is Hellebuck, even though he faced less volume in that game yesterday, he's been making the huge saves in timely fashion. He was the big reason that team ends up winning against Edmonton after they get down 2-0. He could have just folded, but didn't. 38 saves made on the 40 shots he faced. But I also liked how the Jets were creating on the PK and cycling the puck around, using that forecheck to their advantage, taking advantage of bad execution by the Blues, trying to clear their zone. The defense was holding the line, making plays, getting involved in the offense. Connor, like you said, buried a sweet goal. And overall, the Jets played solid defensively for the most part, outshot this Blues team 30-20. Hellebuck made the saves when he needed to. And overall, a very good game from the Jets, who saw some balance too in guys like Barron and Gustafson
Yeah.
in the net.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I like the idea. I like the idea of Alex Iafallo on the top line, even dating back to training camp. It's just, Alex Iafallo just kind of fits in wherever he's put, and I thought that line played really well last night. But I mean, there's a special shout out to the third line. I mean, you look at the analytics. I believe at 5-on-5, they outchanced. 8-1 and outshot or out attempted at least 11-2, which is exactly what you would expect from this third line right now. It's just it's populated with players that Adam Lowry doesn't have to try to let's say carry along with him. I think Mason Appleton being back there with him, with Niederreiter, it creates a line that's just really, really hardworking, and so that line was really good. There was an extended portion of a shift in the second period where they were just hemming in the Blues, and really those are the types of things that happen in a game that really kind of suck the wind out of an opposing team. If you can really grind them down low on the half wall, that sort of thing, really just keep possession going. More often than not, you're either going to score a goal or draw a penalty. The Jets obviously did the former there, scoring a couple of goals just off of great play in the offensive zone. So yeah, I mean it was a good game, and now the Jets head on the road. They're going to play a tough Detroit team on Thursday. I think Detroit is a team that's really kind of transformed itself under Steve Yzerman. It's been a bit of a slower rebuild there, but it's been done the right way, and sort of what you'd expect from Yzerman, who was the architect of the Tampa Bay Lightning team that's now under Julian Breezeball. But it's a tough test. They're going in there. Obviously, the Michigan guys on the team always enjoy Detroit. I was there last year. I remember, there's so many family members of Connor Hellebuck, Kyle Connor, others that come in from Ontario. I believe Cole Perfetti's family was there last season. Mark Scheifele's was there as well. So yeah, it's a big game for a lot of these Jets players because they get to see a lot of friends and family at Little Caesars Arena, and yeah, it's fun for them. So it's never difficult for the Jets to get up for that type of game, and I think now that they've won two on the trot here, and brought themselves back to 500. I think they felt that Edmonton was a bit of a launching pad for them. And now it's, yeah, you got to keep it going. It's this league, it's hard to win in. Hear players tell you that every time, but you got to keep the winning going. And this is a good chance for the Jets to get kind of out of Winnipeg, away from maybe some of the controversy or whatever you want to call it about the attendance numbers right now, and just kind of go and, for the first time really this year, go on an actual road trip, because it's only really had kind of one-offs in Calgary and Edmonton so far. So yeah, it's the team's trending well, and we'll see what happens in Detroit. It's a big test on Thursday, and one that the Jets at least appear at this point ready to meet when they get there.
Yeah, and we'll get into those games coming up later on in the segment. But the Jets on the road tomorrow night against the Red Wings to take on Detroit. On Saturday, they'll be in Montreal to take on the Montreal Canadiens. But to start off the season, this Jets team, Scott, is at 500 now, again with their record at 3-3.
Yep.
They've averaged the 11th most goals per game so far and have given up the 29th most goals against per average, but goaltending and their play there got off to a slower start. I think there's been a lot of times where this Jets team has kind of let down their goaltending with their bad puck management and their lack of positioning. I thought in St. Louis their structure probably looked the strongest it has all season.
Mhm.
And a big thing for this Jets team so far is they're not allowing that many shots against per game, just allowing the crucial goals to go in those crucial miss breakdowns in the zone. But your thoughts on how things have started for the Jets outside of that game in St.
Yeah,
Louis, or
yeah.
again?
I thought their first three games of the year were pretty good. Maybe LA was in part of those three, so maybe the first two games were pretty good. Then the LA game happened, but I thought the Jets team bounced back against Vegas. I really did. I mean, it was obviously didn't go well for them that night. They did lose that game, but down 3-1, there was no quit in the team, and maybe teams of the past in this town, 3-1 down to the defending Stanley Cup champions. You might pack her in. Jets battle back, got it to 3-3, and then a bad penalty turned into a power play goal, and then that kind of cost the Jets the game there. But overall, I mean, I think you look at the goals for, I mean, the goals against, I think that number, as you mentioned, was always, it's a bit of an anomaly.
Yeah.
The way that obviously Connor Hellebuck has played throughout his career, you're gonna look at that trend more than a couple of games where he didn't have his best starts of his career, for sure. It's actually, it was the worst start of his career up until the Edmonton game. But yeah, I just think this team has coming into the second year with Rick Bowness, a lot more familiarity with the systems, a lot more familiarity with what they're being asked to do, and a lot more buy-in, I suppose, into how this team needs to play to win. And I think the influx of the LA guys, the guys that came in the Pierre Dubois trade, and obviously Gabe Vilardi's now out for 4 to 6 with an MCL sprain, but Alex Iafallo has been a great addition to this team, and showing 3 goals so far this season, showing his worth offensively and his versatility, being up in the lineup now on the top line. And then you look at Rasmus Kupari, and I've really liked his play. I've really liked how he's kind of turned that fourth line into, there's a threat there. There's a threat that they could score, and he's on top of that a pretty good penalty killer as well. So, yeah, I mean, overall, if I'm looking at this team, yeah, and I've written about this, I think the pieces are there to be a good, is it a top of the conference or top of the division team at the moment? I don't know if that's the case. We'll see when Vilardi gets back. Depends what happens with Ville Heinola in the new year once he's back out of his 8 to 12 week kind of range on his broken ankle there. So it's possible this team is still going to get better, in terms of its personnel at least. And yeah, I've liked the way that this team has kind of flipped a bit of the script analytically. This is a team over the years that's been very much in the basement when it comes to a lot of the, the telling analytics, expected goals, the shot share, the Corsi, if you will. And now they're kind of really dictating a lot of these games, dictating the play. And so yeah, that's a the I think if you go back to last season, or at least back to the summer, and you're like, okay, well, we're going to subtract Pierre-Luc Dubois from this, and you're going to subtract Blake Wheeler. It's a lot of offense that this team's missing, but it's still producing at a great rate. You're still getting some, you got Josh Morrissey, obviously, back to up, going back to, hasn't really skipped a beat since his, last season and his breakout year last year. And yeah, I think there's a little more harmony this year. I mean, I think, there's just, it's a much more harmonious team, and I think that's showing on the ice, and I think it's showing in the way that this team responds to either in-game adversity, or if you put up a stinker like they did against LA, they came back and put a pretty solid effort in against Vegas. So yeah, early season, obviously we're only 6 games in. It's easy to make wild proclamations. Probably not the best idea, but I've liked most of what I've seen so far, outside of a couple games and maybe a couple moments in each of those games. So yeah, I think if I think it's a good sign so far.
Yeah, and I think you're bang on with the anomaly of our goaltending starting out the way it did, because in the
Right.
past, and for, a number of years leading up to this year, it's been the goaltending that has gotten this Jets team to the playoffs with the phenomenal play of Connor Hellebuyck. And it was only a matter of time until he would look like he's back to his old self. 38 of 40 shots against, he made the 38 saves against the
Yeah.
Oilers. Like I said yesterday, making huge saves, even though we didn't face as much volume. But I think what's been huge, another thing you said, is that this Jets team is dictating more of the play throughout these games, aside from the one in LA or against LA when they were in Winnipeg, and the one in Edmonton on Saturday night.
Hmm.
I think that we've seen that balance on full display, even though Velarde's out of the lineup. And once he comes back in, I think this Jets team is going to be even more dangerous with the things he can bring. But I'm with you in terms of Alex Iafallo getting his first line minutes, fitting in well with that line of Mark Scheifele and Kyle Connor, and also being that guy that's going to go to the net and battle for that
Yep.
line as well. I think for a guy like Mark Scheifele, he's been looking like the most complete version of Mark Scheifele we've
Yeah.
seen in years, actually given a crap to get back defensively and make those plays, not shying away from the rough stuff as much. Kyle Connor showing his skill yesterday was great too. And, Rasmus Kupari, I sang his praises heading into this year, saying he'd be a reliable player on that fourth line. He's shown more than that. He's shown speed, he's shown poise, and, a guy that's also shown in that game when Velarde went out against LA that he can move up and down the lineup and fill needs there. How he's showing up is going to be a huge reason why Winnipeg goes as far as they can still this season. I still do think that there's holes on the defensive core when you look at guys like Nate Schmidt and how Brendan Dillon have started the year, even a guy like Neil Pionk. But if the Jets can continue to limit shots the way they have throughout the first 6 games of the season, and Hellebuyck can raise his play a bit and this team can settle into their system more, I think the Jets are in for a pretty good year. I think adding Niederreiter to that third line was a good decision by Bonus, even though that second line was creating at probably the highest level out of the Jets lines leading into the switch there against Vegas. I think though that Nemestikov has shown that he can fit at that second centerman position, even though I
Right.
think Perfetti should get a shot there again. I think that you have Perfetti in a spot he's more comfortable in. And with Nikolai Ehlers emerging and finally playing the way we know he can play, that line has been able to create at a high level throughout these past games that they've been with each other. I love that response against Vegas. Winnipeg probably should have won that game. Got
Yeah.
goaled a bit by Thompson and had some bad puck management, some bad puck decisions. But overall, this season, I really do like the way that the decor is getting involved in play. A guy like Dylan DeMello is really showing that he can also provide some
Yeah.
good offense and make some plays there. Morrissey's been good. I'd say the only weaknesses with this Jets team is when they do get hemmed in their own zone. Wasn't as much of a problem against the St. Louis Blues. I do think, though, the Jets moving forward need to find ways to improve that decor in some way to
Yeah.
get a bit more help there for Connor Hellebuck. But if Hellebuck plays at that level, Scott, I think that Jets fans should be pretty comfortable with who they got in net this year and with making that decor a bit more
Yeah.
tolerable to handle.
Yeah. I mean, I'll say this. I mean, I haven't disliked Neil Pionk's game. Neil Pionk was dealing with something last year. He still won't kind of divulge what it was, but that's fine. He doesn't have to. But it's quite clear that he was injured, and I think even Rick Bowness at the end of last year, or maybe at the beginning of this year, kind of confirmed as much. I think Pionk has also kind of confirmed as much. He just hasn't kind of led on to how much. He obviously played through it. Yeah, I mean, they do need more out of Nate Schmidt. There's a reason why he was healthy scratched. Against who was it now? Now I'm just drawing a blank. Against Vegas, sorry. Yeah, and that's a tough one, right? That's his former team. So you get scratched, a healthy scratch against your former team. That's yeah, that's a message sending. The message was sent there. They need more from Nate Schmidt. It's the second time he's been healthy scratch in as many years. Now he was just healthy scratch last season as well. And they need more from him. Yeah, I'll give Nate Schmidt the benefit of the doubt here, though. He missed quite a bit of camp with a lower body injury. I believe it was a groin injury. And for a 32-year-old, that's quite a bit. That's a significant chunk of time to miss. I mean, a lot of these veterans, whether they like to admit it or not, carrying camp's a big deal for them, and it's getting back into it. It's getting the feet moving. It's retraining your body on all the movements that go into being an NHLer and playing and that sort of thing. When you miss that, I think there's an element of catch up. I think we've seen that with Nikolai Ehlers as well. I think he's still on 2 assists this year, hasn't scored yet. And I think part of the move of getting Vlad Nemestikov up there was just as much to perhaps maybe relieve, let's say, Cole Perfetti from the pressures of playing center in the NHL, but also just as much to try and spark Nikolai Ehlers, who missed all of training camp essentially. I mean, he had a few skates here and there, but he didn't play in any of the games. And so for a guy who trains all summer and then just is sidelined for most of the training camp, but again, there's an element there of having to kind of catch up to the rest of the team who's 3 weeks ahead of you in terms of their fitness at least. So yeah, I mean, you look at the defense. We'll see. I'm interested to see what happens when Hanelick gets back. I think 8 to 12 weeks is just a rough timeline. How long is it going to take? I mean, it's not like he's skating at the moment, right? Like, this is one of the things that it's going to be difficult for him. 8 to 12 weeks is, if let's say the healing just takes 10 weeks, can he get back into kind of game ready shape without really having much, hard skating in a good chunk of time? And how kind of far is he going to feel behind? So, it's interesting. We'll see what happens at the deadline. We'll see where the Jets are at the deadline, because that's another thing that we kind of aren't entirely sure yet. I mean, this team's still 3-3. We don't know where it's going to end up, but yeah, I think if you're looking at this team, perhaps at some point you're going to look to Declan Chisholm, see what look he gives you. I don't think Logan Stanley really stood out in the game that he played. I think if you read into what Rick Bowness said, he was fine. Is something that I mean, you wouldn't want to hear your girlfriend or your wife say, never mind your head coach. So I think that was reading between the lines there. I'm not entirely certain that was he put his best foot forward in that game. So yeah, I mean, I think the defense is probably the question mark on this team. It'll probably be the one thing that gets looked at the most because of how good the forwards seem to be so far. Yeah, we'll see. Lots of time, lots of runway left, and lots of times for guys to either step up or maybe have to let's say step out and look for other guys that might enhance this team or make it better kind of as a whole on the blue line.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be the big determining factor, obviously, where this Jets team is at deadline to really assess if they should go all in or maybe they
Yeah,
should sell a bit, depending on how things happen. I'm in agreement with you on Logan Stanley. I don't think those comments can't confirm anything, but weren't the most positive from Rick Bonus, even though he
yeah,
just said it was fine. But yeah, I'd rather see Declan Chisholm get a shot over him if they do need a D man to go in. But to your point about Neil Pionk, he was excellent when he first got here to Winnipeg. Since then, though, like you said, maybe he's been going through injury. He alluded to that. Rick Bonus alluded to that. But when you're paying a guy almost $6 million to get the results out of Neil Pionk in these last two seasons, the Jets fans have, he just hasn't been as good as he was when he first came in. His play has declined quite a bit. And with a guy like Nate Schmidt, who, yes, he's behind in terms of his development, but that's another guy that has been here for a few years now. Jets almost paying him $6 million. So
hmm
you start to kind of question what you're getting out of those players with the type of money they're making. And in a win now mode, are those pieces that become expendable down the line? I think Brendan Dillon certainly could be, because he is easier to move, I think, out of those two at this point, becoming an upcoming UFA. But I do agree with that point about Nemesnikov in terms of getting someone to play with Ehlers, someone that he's played with a bit before and they looked good together. So going back to some old chemistry to spark the Jets' most creative player in terms of creating chances in the past 3 years, I think was a solid move from Rick Bonus. But yeah, I think that this Jets forward group is coming through nicely. I think that once Gabe Velarde does come back, this forward group is going to be even more explosive in terms of finishing chances, because he's
right.
got one heck of a shot. But yeah, I do love the play of the top pairing right now in Morrissey and DeMello. Sandberg's been great so far. I think once Hanola gets into the lineup, or I hope he does at least when he does come back, the Jets will have one more solid defenseman in there. It's just the rest of those guys. How can they carry the load this season when the team needs guys like Schmidt and Dillon to step up in those moments?
Yeah, I mean, you look at the analytics on the pairings at least that the Jets have on the blue line. Obviously, you're gonna like what you see from Morrissey and DeMello because it's all positive, and they play the best. They play the toughest minutes every night and the most minutes every night. Um, I think where this team is kind of running into a bit of an issue is they don't really know. It's just the Brendan Dillon Nate Schmidt pairing doesn't really work, and so the problem that they have is that the Dylan Sandberg and Neil Pionk one is actually very good, at least analytically speaking. And so you'd like to have that, but then you still have to deal with, the problem that you have with Brendan Dillon and Nate Schmidt together, and it's just not as good. Could they shelter those guys? Maybe, I'm not even entirely sure it's all on Brendan Dillon. Because they like Brendan Dillon. They like the size, they like the physicality that he brings to it. They like that he dropped the gloves there the other night with his former teammate on San Jose, Evander Kane, the former Jet, obviously. Those are the things that the players on this team like. But at the end of the day, it's about winning hockey games, and I think the first guy I think Nate Schmidt is the guy that probably comes out when they have, let's say another bad game, or if Nate Schmidt doesn't have it that night. I mean, I think it's going to be touch and go with Schmidt, right now. I think Nate Schmidt's still going through a time on his own right now, trying to figure out kind of where he's at, coming out of the training camp that we talked about earlier. So yeah, I mean, I think there's room for improvement there. I just think that this team is sort of handcuffed because they want to. I think in an ideal world, you got Josh and you got Morrissey and DeMello, and then you would have Sandberg and Pionk as a pair, and then you would have, who knows? I mean, you could have, whatever way that you kind of want to look at it there, but you that's the third pairing that they still haven't kind of figured out. Until they kind of figure that out, I don't know if they're going to be able to run their ideal setup. They obviously the Hanley injuries really kind of put I think I'm still of the belief that Ville Heinola would have been in the opening night lineup, never mind on the roster, because he just had that good of a training camp. And so, yeah, I mean, we might. I don't expect Heinola back before the new year. An 8 to 12 week timeline at the beginning of October is basically that's 3 months, and it's a tough injury to come back from because, like I said earlier, you just can't skate. And he'll do some light skating eventually when it's done. But I mean, here's a guy who's in Finland right now because there's just not much they can do until he had surgery to fix it. So I mean that adds a bit of a layer of added recovery to it. So yeah, I mean it's just that's the way it is on defense unless they're willing to make a trade. And the problem with making a trade is nobody wants the Nate Schmidt contract. I think if you're trying to win, you're probably not looking to move Brendan Dillon to another team, because there's a lot of teams that have called on Brendan Dillon over the years. I don't think that'd be the same now, but Brendan Dillon's the type of guy that I think ideally, you'd want him to be playing at his best come playoff time. Depending what they do, depending what it looks like, he could, potentially even be the seventh defenseman, depending on how it kind of shakes out over the next whatever we got 78 games or 76 games left. So yeah, I mean there's a lot of just kind of we'll wait and see. The season's got to play out, got to figure it out. I mean, this team's been obviously affected by injuries early on. We'll see how that continues to go. I mean, teams rarely go unscathed through the regular season. So yeah, I mean, early on, I think, if the question mark right now, I mean, there was multiple question marks in years previous, but from, the bottom six, you don't have to talk about that much any longer. You don't have to really talk about scoring any longer, it seems. I mean, Jets are scoring at a pretty good clip. I think goaltending is always going to be there for them, even after a shaky start. So yeah, I mean, I think you're going to hone in on the defense because at the end of the day, that's probably where this team could use the improvement. But a little early to suggest that this team's going to kind of make any kind of brash decisions until they have to, or until they kind of figure out what type of team they are. Where are they going to be? A bubble team? Are they going to be a fighting for second or third place in the division? We'll find out. It's early still. So
yeah, for sure. Lots to be sorted out still soon. And yeah, I mean, the Jets are kind of in that situation, like you said, where, if you go out and trade a guy like Brendan Dillon, who's exactly going to come in and replace him, you'd have to hope that Declan Chisholm could really elevate his game or at least show he's worthy to step into that slot. And of course, with Nate Schmidt, his contract, it's kind of, unmovable with the amount of money unless the Jets were able to retain some of that and team were to keep on. But it really depends on how he elevates his stock or not, and the time he is in the lineup to see what happens there. And hoping that Heinola can be the same type of player when he comes in, because I think he honestly could have played on this team's top four, potentially with Dylan Samberg because of the chemistry they showed. But we'll get to this real quick here, Scott, because we are running out of time a bit. But the Jets' upcoming matchups against the Red Wings tomorrow night, against the Canadiens on the road on Saturday night, back at home against the Rangers on Monday. I think that the Jets, Scott, they can go out and beat this Red Wings team tomorrow, a team that's given up more in terms of the analytics, in terms of Corsi against than Corsi for this season. Jets are in the opposite in that category, have shown that they can dictate the play. I think Connor Hellebuck comes out and has a huge game. If the Jets do decide to play him, I'd have to think he's in net, and I think the Jets end up winning that one in a close one. 5-3, 4-3, maybe. I think if all things go well, this team should go into Montreal and take care of business unless they lay a stinker on Saturday night. But I do think that game against the Rangers Monday could be a bit tougher with what the Rangers have, and their goaltending with Igor Shesterkin is excellent when he's on top of his game. But I think they're all three winnable games for the Jets. I see them at least getting two of them. I'm calling them to win tomorrow and on Saturday. Unsure about the Monday game coming up, but your thoughts on how you think these next few games are going to go for the Jets?
Yeah, I mean the Red Wings are, they're looking like they're the real deal this year. I'm interested to see them. Obviously, their analytics might not be where you'd want them to be, but 5-1-1 out of the gate is good. And you got Dylan Larkin with 12 points on the team. You got Alex DeBrincat, who they got in the summer from Ottawa, 6 goals. You got Shane Gostisbehere, who's kind of rekindled his career there. He's got 3 goals and 9 points through there's 7 games so far. So like, I mean, it's a team that's obviously finding no problem scoring it, and their goaltending. I believe it's Ville Husso and James Reimer there now. Yeah, I mean, I'm not, obviously Husso is, I think his goals against is, somewhere in the threes or whatever. I mean, so is Connor Hellbucks, to be fair. So, I look at this Detroit team as probably one of the, they're going to be good. I mean, I don't know if it's this year or really, next year. I mean, they got Mort Seider. They got, they obviously got some good players on that team. Lucas Raymond. I mean, you can list a bunch of guys, and obviously Dylan Larkin, as we talked about, as I mentioned earlier. So it's a good team. It's a good team, and it's a big test for the Jets. Because I think, the gatekeeper to maybe, eventually being 6-3 by the next Monday is this Detroit team. If they can go in there, put a solid effort against Detroit, I think they go into Montreal, and as long as they don't do what they did last year and lose what I was like 7-1, I think in Montreal. I think that might have been last year. It might have been the year before that. Yeah, I remember them going to Montreal and putting up a real clunker. So you can't lose sight of it. It's going to be Saturday night. It's hockey night in Canada. I suspect that they're going to play Laurent Brossoit in that game. Rick Bowness said that they wanted to get Brossoit another game this week. So if I'm thinking about it, well, Hellebuck's going to play in his hometown on Thursday. I think you give Brossoit that, and then you give Hellebuck the Monday nighter against Blake Wheeler and the New York Rangers. So, and yeah, the Rangers is a good team. Obviously, great goaltending. Could be an interesting game with Blake Wheeler coming back after spending 12 years here. 7 of those, I believe, as the captain. Yeah, it's going to be an emotional game, I think, on both sides. And yeah, I think the Jets again just got to keep playing it the way that they're playing, impose your will as much as you can, be on the right side of the puck possession, because that all matters, and keep kind of shooting the puck, keep racking it up, and keep playing the way, and keeping shots down and that sort of thing. I mean, those have been kind of the hallmarks of their wins so far, and even in a couple of their losses where they've just been maybe unlucky. So yeah, big week. I mean, everyone is weak. Every game is big in this league. I mean, you want to be stacking up points now too, because you don't want to be chasing them in March and April and early April. So yeah, big road trip, and yeah, we'll see how this Jets team does. Kind of away from home, where they've played the majority of their games so far this season.
Yeah, and Blake Wheeler coming back on Monday. It'll be interesting to see what type of reception he gets from the fans that will be in the there in Winnipeg. But yeah, this Red Wings team, I mean, yeah, not the best analytically so far, but they have been, even though they might be getting outplayed, have gotten really good goaltending from Ville Husso. And guys like DeBrincat have shown their back. Larkin's been great, like you said, to start the season. And yeah, I think we're in agreement there on that Canadiens game. If the Jets don't lay a stinker, they end up winning that. But yeah, I think if the Jets continue to force the issue offensively like they have, get that good puck movement and be hard on that forecheck, play as a complete unit, and work the puck around well, I think the more time they spend out of their D zone, the better, which Winnipeg has shown they can do at a lot of points so far this year. So Scott Billeck, thanks for taking the time. Sports reporter for the Winnipeg Sun and Jets beat reporter. We'll do this again at some point, Scott. You take care and enjoy the upcoming Jets hockey action. You'll be reporting on all of it.
Will do. Thanks. Appreciate it.
And Scott Billeck, Winnipeg Jets beat reporter and sports reporter for the Winnipeg Sun, joining episode 7 of the Jet Fuel podcast, brought to you by Mid Canada Fasteners and Tools, your one-stop shop for all your industrial needs, as well as Terrico, serving Manitoba producers for over 80 years. Check out their website, terrico.ca, and Goaltenders, your goalie's personal video review service. be sure to check out Gordy Tumelson's website, as this is his service, GordyTumelsonGoalies.ca. And speaking of Gordy Tumelson, he is the goaltending coach for Pilot Mountain Hockey Academy. An all-new edition of that podcast airs tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Central Time. You won't want to miss it airing here on this YouTube channel, G Show Productions, as well as on our website at gshow.ca. But coming up after the next transition, I'm going to be back to talk about the attendance update for Winnipeg Jets games since I last talked about it, as well as the Jets coming up against the Detroit Red Wings, their matchup there, what I think the keys to the game are going to be for the Jets to beat Detroit on Thursday night, which is tomorrow. You're watching the official Jets podcast, Winnipeg Jets podcast of G Show Productions. I'll be right back with you in just a moment for more. Welcome back, everybody, to the Jet Fuel Podcast. Before we continue things, just want to say with MIG Canada Fasteners and Tools, until the end of this month, you can go to their stores in either Brandon or Winnipeg and use the promo code JETSPOD to get 5% off all tools in in-store purchase, as well as 10% off accessories and hardware when you do use that promo code. So go support their brand, go buy some tools they sell from brands like Milwaukee and other established ones. Visit their website if you want to do more of your own research at MakeCanadaFasteners.shop to see what they're all about, to see what they carry, as they got all your industry needs. They're your one-stop shop for it. But yeah, in terms of yesterday's game, the Jets ended up moving to 500 on the season in terms of the record, but attendance still low. 11,136 was the reported number by this episode's guest, Scott Billeck. And yeah, you know, this I feel like is going to be an ongoing issue throughout the season unless something changes. I think that one thing that definitely helps, and I talked about it last episode, is the Jets just playing well and being in the race and being an exciting team to watch. I think yesterday against St. Louis, there were not really many flashes of excitement from the team, but they did end up getting the win. They were executing their game plan at a high level, making skill plays still, but it wasn't like amazingly flashy out there, as I would go to say. But I was happy with the Jets' effort. I think that the more you win, now that Hellebuck's playing good, like I talked about, the more you win, the more fans will potentially want to come. But one thing that has to change outside of the product on ice is the activities. I think get more activities going in the pregame for fans to be involved in and interact in. And I drove by IG Field to go drop my sister off at university on Saturday because she wanted to go study. I don't know why I was so direct with that in terms of what I did. I could have said something else, but yeah, I just saw a bunch of cool stuff outside of IG Field, and I thought, man, that's probably for the pregame, and they make it fun going to Bomber games. When you go to a Jets game, it's like you just end up going to your seat, and for the game, maybe you walk around, but it's pretty tight in that arena. But you know, I think that Lisa Hood on Twitter, formerly known as Twitter, now called X, she brought up something great, which I think is bringing theme nights. I feel like the Jets have done that before. To be honest, as big of a Jets fan I am, I don't go to many games, to be honest, per year. About 3 per year is probably my max. I said that last episode, but I think if you get more theme nights in there, you can pick cool ones, not just the ordinary ones that have been done, but find something that truly represents the spirit of Winnipeg, Manitoba, and hockey fans here in the city, and you can also play off their likenesses as well. And, you know, maybe you end up thinking, what do Winnipeggers really want in terms of something fun at a hockey game? I think you got to give people a reason to go. You got to up the in-game entertainment. Repeating a lot of the same stuff as I said last week, in terms of ticket prices, I brought up the prices last time. Yeah, you can go get cheaper tickets elsewhere, but not as many people do that. Not as many people know about those services. I can't really remember them off the top of my head. But yeah, I think the thing, like I talked about last week, for the Winnipeg Jets to get more fans into seats would definitely be what I just talked about in terms of the in-game entertainment. But having a product on ice that I think will excite fans, I think the more you win, the more you can bring fans into the seat to prove you're a legit team. Are the Jets quite there yet? They're 3-3. It's 6 games into the season. It's great to see the forward group doing good. It's great to see Hellebuyck settling back into things and proving why he is an $8.5 million paid goaltender, making the big saves like I've talked about. But it's all about consistency, and how can the Jets go out and prove that they can be that consistent, fun team to go out and watch on a nightly basis. And don't get me wrong, as I said, boring for that game against the Blues in terms of there wasn't that much skill and flashiness for the Jets. They have shown to make some really nice plays with the puck this season so far. They still did that against St. Louis, and that's something they'll have to do against the Detroit Red Wings coming up. I think this is a big test for all the Jets fans tuning in to see against a team which I don't know in Detroit if they're going to be able to hold up their success they're having this early on in the season into the upwards parts of this 2023-2024 season. But as we stand right now, like Scott Billeck said, this is a huge test for the Winnipeg Jets. I think that for Winnipeg in that game coming up against the Detroit Red Wings, which is tomorrow night, you have to play good defensively against Detroit. You're not going to be able to contain their top-end guys like DeBrincat and Larkin all night long, but you can try your best to limit them as most as possible. You take a look at the Red Wings right now. They got the best shooting percentage in the league and the most goals per game on average. This is a team that also has guys within the lineup, not just in that top 6, that are scoring. Guys like David Perron are putting up offense. Joe Veleno as well is putting up some offense for this team. So for this Detroit Red Wings team, they're dangerous when they get their chances. They don't have the most shots per game in the league, nowhere close to it, but that shooting percentage is scary. DeBrincat has been that guy this season, and I think one thing that plays into the Jets' favor is, I've already mentioned it in this episode, but they have limited shots pretty well. 9th least shots given up against per game on average this season, and I think it will be a big test, especially for that top pairing going up against that top line for Detroit. I think that the Jets, if they play a style where they play up-tempo and they're direct breaking out of their zone, they can control most of the play in this game like they have been for most of this season. But you need to play structured against a Detroit Red Wings team that will make you pay if you make mistakes on when they have the puck on the offensive side of things. You can't break down against a team as opportunistic as they are at the blue line of the Red Wings, like when the Jets are in the Red Wings end, as well as in the Jets' own D zone. You can't get sucked in puck watching against a team that's proven they can move the puck around very well this season in the offensive zone, and also capitalize on odd man rushes, 2-on-1, stuff like that. But for the Jets, I think with Connor Hellebuyck in the pipes, I've talked about it already, I'd say that he goes out and has a really solid performance. I think he gives up 2 to 3 goals. I think that Detroit's going to find some ways to get chances and get on the board, but I do believe that Connor Hellebuyck's going to go out and make the big saves when he needs to. And offensively, if the Jets can hem this Detroit Red Wings team in, be hard on the forecheck, and get to the net and capitalize on completing those passes or getting those pucks to the net, I do believe that the Jets will go out and have success against a Detroit team where, honestly, Ville Husso his numbers have been subpar so far this season. Taking a look at it, he's sub 900 in terms of save percentage. James Reimer was actually in net for the back-to-back wins before yesterday's loss, and this Detroit team, they've been outshot in the past 4 games that they've played. Winnipeg has done a really good job of generating chances this year. I do like how the lines are clicking right now. I think that I follow on that top line has talked about compliments guys like Mark Scheifele and Kyle Connor really well. Ehlers, Perfetti, and Nemesnikov have proven that they can be a line that can generate positive scoring chances. Adding Nino Niederreiter to that third line, I believe, gives the Jets a really good balanced attack, with Lowry playing some of the best hockey that I've seen him play as a Winnipeg Jet to start the season at the very least. If this team limits the breakdowns offensively, continues to cycle the puck around well against Detroit and get to the net, make their defense not sit back, have them get a bit discombobulated out there, with your heavy forecheck and stuff like that. I think that the Jets can and will go out and make a statement game against Detroit tomorrow. I got the Jets winning. Let's go with, I said 5-3, 4-3 earlier on in the show. I'm going to say the Jets win it 4-2 tomorrow, with that fourth goal being an added empty netter. And I think that Kyle Connor goes out and has a big game against his Michigan, in Michigan, a place where he's played before in college hockey. And I think that he pots one and has a few points, maybe even at that. But yeah, coming up next week on the Jet Fuel podcast, I think that it's going to be a fun one. We're going to have some other great guests on the show, so you won't want to miss it. I totally forgot. I was supposed to have Evan Samoilov on tonight's episode. We didn't reconnect and reconvene on that, but I'll have more about what's to come on the Jet Fuel podcast coming up next week here on G Show Productions on our YouTube channel and our website for episode 7 on our website if you're watching through there. Well, you've made it to the end of the G Show podcast here on G Show Productions. I've been your host, Graham, the G Show Forsyth. And yeah, the Jets game tomorrow should be an entertaining one. Nice to see the players that are from or have played at Michigan go out to, some familiar places and get to play in a familiar rink or a rink that they got to watch games in themselves, or something like that, as well as they know that the state of Michigan is what I'm trying to say. And yeah, I think that especially for Connor Hellebuck, that's going to be a huge game. Kyle Connor especially, knowing that he played his hockey close to there for Michigan University. And yeah, it's going to be exciting to see what happens. Leave your comments, thoughts in the comments on what you do think is going to be the outcome of tomorrow's game. I'm predicting a 4-2 score for the Winnipeg Jets. That's what I'm locking in. But yeah, next week on the Jet Fuel podcast, we're going to have some Jets trivia. We're going to think of some cool, fun challenges to do maybe on this podcast moving forward. So I'm going to post this in the Facebook group page, the Jet Fuel page, and we're going to try to get as many people in there and have weekly suggestions in terms of that, in terms of what I can do here on the podcast to make it a bit more entertaining, maybe. Not saying that it's not entertaining right now, but maybe adding in some cool segments where it's not just us discussing about the Jets could be a nice change of pace to throw in there. But yeah, in terms of next week, hoping to have some more great guests like I've already said. Special thanks to Scott Billeck for joining this edition of the Jet Fuel podcast. Special thanks to you for tuning in as well. And yeah, I hope that the Winnipeg Jets not only go in and beat Detroit tomorrow, but keep it up with a solid performance against a team who you should beat in the Montreal Canadiens and spoil Blake Wheeler's return party, hopefully, on Monday night next week. And someone tweeted out about Blake Wheeler. As much as, I loved Wheels in his prime, and as much as that contract is actually pretty good that they signed him for, going from an $8 million player to a player who makes around like $800K. That's kind of a nice deal for New York. But, 0 points so far in 6 games played. Yeah, he's not playing in the top of a lineup, but proving that, he's worth that price of, that low right now. But I do think that New York ends up getting a bargain for him, all things considering, as the season goes along. Could see him putting up some more production as things go along potentially this year in the NHL. But for next week, going to have more great guests, going to talk about the Jets and what's been happening with them, talking about the past games, looking ahead, assessing the lineup, and going to, of course, feature Jets trivia, going to also feature whatever you guys' suggestions maybe I'll even think of something to do next week to spice things up here on this podcast. But before we do go, special thanks to Nico Feniak for producing the intro and outro of the Jet Fuel podcast for episode 7 and all the ones beforehand. And special thanks to Gordy Tumbleson's brand Goaltenders, your goalie's personal video review service, for sponsoring this episode, to Terrico, serving Manitoba producers for over 80 years, and to Mig Cannon Fasteners and Tools, your one-stop shop for all your industrial needs. When you visit their stores in Brandon and Winnipeg, be sure to use the Jets Pod promo code to get 5% off all tools and 10% off all accessories and hardware until the end of October when you do end up using that promo code. So be sure to do it. We're going to be running a promo code like this all season long. So we'll have offers for you guys all year long for the one-stop shop for all your industrial needs here in Manitoba and Mig Cannon Fasteners and Tools. But Jet Fuel will be airing next week at 9 p.m. Central Time. Be sure to check out the details on our website at gshow.ca or on our social media handles at gshow Productions or similar to them. They're in the description of this episode. But go Jets, go everybody. Big game tomorrow in Detroit. I've been your host, Graham, the G-Show Forsyth, giving you the salute, peacing out, and saying so long. By the way, if you're a Winnipeg Blue Bombers fan, we got another edition of the True Blue podcast coming out either Friday night or Saturday. But that's all I wanted to say. Playoffs almost here in the CFL, which is fun. But thinking about hockey, thinking about those Jets, and wishing them the best tomorrow. And to you guys watching, see you next Wednesday, folks. G-Show out.